Hi Hires, we are looking now at how different heart structures can help support different levels of metabolic demand and metabolic rate. Okay, so we are looking at how we support metabolism. So metabolism is dependent on respiration, because respiration is what gives us the energy which allows us to do the things we need to do. So respiration needs oxygen. Obviously aerobic respiration requires oxygen, but we're not looking at any form of fermentation. That's very poor return for how much energy you get out. Okay, so this time we're looking at oxygen. We need a way to supply it. And we also need to get rid of the carbon dioxide that is being produced. And that is blood. This is the transport system that we're going to use. And we're just looking at different animals in this little key area. So we're looking at, in all of these, we're looking at a closed circulatory system. That is not true in all things. Some have open circulatory systems, but we all have closed ones. That means that the blood is inside blood vessels. And then it's moved round with a pump, which we know it's the heart. So it's not straightforward. Not all animals have the same types of hearts. Okay, the number of times you go through the heart to completely circulate is either a single or a double. If it's a single, then it means they go through the heart once. So the blood is literally going around just in one loop. So that's only going to need 2 chambers, because you're just going to need to collect the blood and then pump the blood. You should recognise from this for us, we have a double system. Okay, so what that means is that our blood goes through the heart twice for it to get back to where it started. So it comes in, it goes out to the lungs, it then comes back in from the lungs, out to the body, and then comes back in again. So that's been twice through the heart to get back to the original point in the heart. Right, so let's start with the singles. We're looking at fish as the best example of this. So what we have is really simple. We have one atrium and one ventricle. Deoxygenated blood comes back from the body into the atrium, which is always what an atrium does. It just collects a kind of pool of blood, which is then pushed into the ventricle, and then the ventricle does a hefty push to shove it round with enough pressure to get around the whole of the body. So it's not particularly efficient, this particular one, because we're only doing one loop and there's quite a lot of time when it's deoxygenated. They have a fairly low BMR, so they've not got a very high biological demand for energy. They are also ectotherms, which we will talk about a bit later, which means that their internal temperature is decided by the external. So overall, they don't need a hugely efficient system because the demand is not as high. Okay, so we are going to try to get to a double, but in between we have something called an incomplete double. So it really shouldn't surprise you. We're this time going to go with 3 chambers. Okay, so this first one we have here is the amphibians. So they have 2 atriums and 1 ventricle. So you have blood that's coming back to the heart from the body, which we can see here. Okay, and we also have blood coming back from the lungs. So this looks kind of like what we have, but you'll notice that in the middle here we have a mixing of the bloods, and that makes it less efficient because there is not fully completely oxygenated, deoxygenated. What we've got is some of the deoxygenated is getting mixed back in with it. Okay, and this gets pumped back out through our 2 main arteries, one going to the body, one going up to the lungs. So to try and deal with the fact that it's not quite as efficient, they have a little clever system here, which is that because they have moist skin, they can actually get diffusion of extra oxygen through the skin to bump up the fact that they've lost some of the oxygenated when they did this mix to deoxygenated. So 3 chambers, 2 atrium, 1 ventricle, incomplete double in amphibians. We also have incomplete doubles in reptiles. So we have another problem here though, because reptiles don't have moist skin, they have dry skin. So if they have dry skin, they're not going to be able to do that little boost that you could get by diffusing extra oxygen from the air. So instead, what you need to do is to try and prevent a little bit of that mixing. So they have this structure here, a different colour, this structure here. Okay, so you have a little partial division. It's not all the way up to here, which is where you'd kind of want it to go. You'd want it to kind of come up to here and do a proper division, which we have. But instead what we have is partially up here, and it's stopping most of the mixing, but it's not perfect. Okay, so we have the same thing. We have 2 atriums, 1 ventricle, but this time, to try and improve the efficiency a bit, we've tried to prevent a little bit of that mixing going on. And finally we get to the complete double. So the complete double we find in mammals and birds. It is the most complicated because there is the highest metabolic demand. And the metabolic demand is because, well, one, temperature. We would consider the kind of old school version of this would be warm-blooded rather than cold-blooded. And by warm-blooded, what we actually mean is that we maintain our internal temperature regardless of the external temperature. And that is very, very costly. Okay, and that means you need a very efficient system. And then on top of that, we have very high activity levels, and so that means that again you're going to have to pay for it. So to make sure that there's absolutely as much efficiency as we can in this, there is no mixing of blood. Okay, so the blood goes through the heart twice, but each of those is completely separated from one another. Okay, some Nat 5 revision on this one. Here is your deoxygenated blood coming back from the body into the heart, flowing into the right atrium. Then goes through a valve into the right ventricle. Right ventricle up through another valve pushes out to the lungs, pulmonary artery out to the lungs. Once it comes back, it's coming back in the pulmonary veins, it's now oxygenated. Comes into the left atrium, down through another valve, into the left ventricle, up through another valve, out to the aorta, back around the body, and then we start the loop again. To show it in kind of a more picture form, here we have the blood flowing in. Now this is just to remind you that it's not a one thing happens right the way around to the lungs and then the lung thing happens. These are 2 parts that are happening at the same time. So we have blood flowing in at the top, being pushed down to the bottom, and then they're pushed back out to go round, and then we start all over again. Just for some facts that I think are pretty impressive. You know, you've only got 4 to 6 litres of blood in your body, but your heart can manage to cycle that around your body in just over a minute, which is impressive. That means in a day you're going to pump over 7,500 litres of blood through your heart. And if you do anything that requires demand, it will do more. And it will keep that up as long as you look after your heart the entire time. So overall, think about blood circulation in terms of efficiency of delivering oxygen, and that is linked to your metabolic demand. The higher the efficiency, the higher the metabolic demand that you can reach. So if our increasing efficiency start off with separating out your circulations to the body and the lungs. Now separate out your oxygen and your deoxygenated blood. And finally, increase pressure. That will make it go faster and therefore increase efficiency. So in terms of order of efficiency in terms of the systems, single, incomplete double, complete double. Your single example is fish, your incomplete is amphibians and reptiles, and your complete is mammals and birds. And that's it.